Hello guys and welcome back to episode 2 of Star Trek Picard and my basic hot take on it. Yes, I have watched it a few times now, episode 2 that is, and there are some things that bugged me, some things I loved, some things I hated, some things I liked, and so on. So let's get right down to it. Right, so here we go. I'm just going to do a brief discussion of everything. I'm going to get to my basic 3 topics. So 3 topics will be story, acting, and screenplay / storyboarding, because I reckon they could have done this a little bit better. So you open up with like a cutscene, like a flashback cutscene to Mars, where the synthetics, which the Romulans call them, or the androids, which we all know them, which Data was, and very brown, very red, something you expect from Mars, but not not from now. You see animations from anywhere really. They look a whole lot better. This looks like a dated animation scene from the early 2000s. Yeah, quite jolting. It does suck you out of it quite simply. Basically, Android F8 murders his bits and pieces, like humans that he's working with, and he goes and basically shuts down bits and pieces along with other androids and whatever have you, and they basically burn Mars. Although you didn't see Mars burning. You did see Mars blowing up in Picard's dreams, but yeah, they didn't seem to have enough money in the budget to actually make Mars burn, because you do see Mars again in the later years, not on fire, but according to the reporter from the first episode, it's still on fire today. So that was a bit sort of jolting. Not jolting, a bit sort of, you raise your eyebrows at. Essentially, you get the gist of the show, of what's going to happen during the show. This episode wasn't very exciting. There weren't explosions. There weren't there was nothing really to talk about, essentially, except that it was basically building up and building up and building up. You have what I'm going to call Scooby-Doo Detective Agency on the case. I don't use those words lightly. That's the nicest way I can really say it. Picard and his Romulan keepers, his house mistress, or whatever you want to call her, they teleport into Data's daughter's house, and she just pulls out this thing that suddenly can detect things from back in the past, and Picard makes a reference to it, saying that it's terrible technology, but she completely sidelines that by saying, but that's what we wanted you to think. And therefore it suddenly becomes great tech that is solely reliable, and using a whole lot of scientific mumbo jumbo that does not make sense. It just, what's going on here? It didn't feel real. It didn't feel organic. I keep using the word organic with the show. It just didn't feel right. She waves this beam thing about, and you get to see again the poor dude get a knife through his freaking heart after he's trying to make his girlfriend a drink or whatever have you. And what? And then they go to the computer, which is obviously a whole lot of swipey screens, whatever have you, and the super secret agency that's committing all these crimes and killing all these people missed something. These people who are trained to do sort of psyopsy things and cyber tech espionage and whatever missed something that these guys thought of in seconds. It's proper Scooby-Doo. Really, it is. It's like a Hanna-Barbera Scooby-Doo show. Honestly, it is. Except you're missing freaking Scooby-Doo. It's another thing on that, right? It's still interesting to know that somehow, some way, somewhere, that Picard hasn't been questioned about this massive explosion on the rooftop that this 3-year-old man has been flung across a rooftop and come out fine. work up on his bed in France. Meanwhile, he's in San Francisco. I think he's in San Francisco, or was it Boston? Boston. Really good on Boston in the future. Confusing. I don't want to say but it keeps getting worse. You see solar roadways on the Golden Gate Bridge. I'm not even sure that was right. I think the Golden Gate Bridge doesn't point in the right direction for the... So, I don't know. I haven't been on that for years. Dracmore, no, I don't. It's very jarring, but in the sense it's that they use big fancy words to sort of confuzzle you into believing that they know what they're talking about. Meanwhile, the actors don't believe the words that are coming out of their mouths. You can see this with the Romulan housekeeper from Picard, and they work together very well. Those two, they act very well together. But even she isn't believing these words. That suddenly she can just wave this thing. That was my biggest sticking point for this. How the fucking hell can you just wave something, and all of a sudden it gives you the things, and then the super secret Romulan agency, the Cardell, whatever you want to call it, managed to erase all of that, okay, because they managed to erase the past. I know it gets worse, but they missed login details on a computer. What? How? And the fact that Mars isn't burning, but that's something else. So, like I said before, you get the basic, this basic frame of what's going to really happen. The Romulans do not like synthetic organisms, as in androids, so they've basically been killing him with the super secret spy agency from Romulus. Even more secret than the other secret agency that Romulan already has. So it's quite interesting. I keep reaching down for my notes because I've got a lot of them. It's interesting. The effects of the show still suck. They really do. And suddenly they're here, and suddenly they're there, and suddenly they're inside the apartment. It doesn't mesh very well, I don't think. It's not organic. It doesn't feel right. It feels like Battlestar Galactica, but it's a bad attempt at regenerating Battlestar Galactica sort of things where I don't want to... Battlestar Galactica, the new one, the first few seasons were great. I loved them. They tapered off to become a bit pants, but were great. God, I don't know. I did enjoy the show. I really did. You get to see a bit more of the actual second twin, Data's second daughter, and you get to see her on the ball cube, and you get to learn why the ball cube is the way it is, because the mainframe network has disconnected that cube from the network or whatever have you, and it's basically just an antique floating in space, and the Romulans have found it, and I believe they're trying to make it their home now. But in the same time, they're coming across all the Borg that are still currently on there, and they're busy reclaiming them, and they call them Nameless, and Data's daughter doesn't like the name Nameless, because these people do have names, and you get to find out that the really sexy-looking guy that approached Data's daughter is actually the spy for the Admiral. Now, the Admiral, or is it the Commander, or the Commandant, whatever, Picard, I get jumping back now, Picard goes to see a friend of his, and he asks for a ship, captaincy of the ship, just to go and clear this, to go and prove that there's bits and pieces and solve the crimes, kind of like the Scooby-Doo detective agency, you know. Not sure if he's Fred. Hope to God he's Fred. Anyway, and he gets declined. So that admiral that spoke to Picard goes speaks to another admiral, or commander, or something, and then that one's the head honcho, the head of the snake that's actually operating all these super secret clandestine operations within planet Earth, and she then calls her subordinate, and that subordinate's now that person's brother that's now shagging, yes, they're shagging Data's daughter. Data's daughter is oblivious to all of this, but he knows what's going on. But you can see in his actions that he's watching this cyborg, the synthetic. She's not a danger to anyone. She's not harming anyone. And I reckon he's going to turn in the next few episodes and go against the I want to say the Cabal. No, it's not the Cabal. It's just big fancy words, but it had no place being there. Honestly, really, they needed to alter their script, and this is seriously telling. It's just one big suck before the explosion, and I hope to God it doesn't go the way of Discovery, because Discovery just didn't make sense after, say, the third episode. It just started getting weird. Anyway, so they're reclaiming Borg citizens, and they're putting the Borg people to work, because you see some Borg peoples that are on there grinding away and whatever have you. And essentially that is just it. Okay, it's a bit about Data's daughter on the Borg cube. Okay, where she's now a scientist and reclaiming life forms and whatever have you. And it's a bit about Picard trying to muddle his way through bits and pieces to try and get a ship. He's called a friend of his to get a ship now because he's been declined. The Romulan housekeepers have told him not to go, at least the woman has. And it looks like the Romulan dude is going with Picard. So that's a bit cool. I'd like to see him do some ninja fighting. Essentially, that's it. Quite a slow-paced episode. As a whole, I know I've been railing on it because there's a lot of plot point missing. Like, no one's come to question Picard about how he was on a roof that suddenly exploded. And you don't see this old man literally in ICU because he's broken every bone in his body, and then somehow passing a medical for Starfleet. And he's above or at minimum for Starfleet requirements. He's just been blown off a freaking roof. How the hell has he passed a freaking medical? Anyway, there's more about that chat with the Doctor that you all know when you get to see him. I'm not trying to do all the spoilers, yeah? Quite nice. So, story as a whole. Let's see. Point one. Story as a whole. I enjoyed the story as a whole. I did. I know I've railed at it, but I can see that they're trying to build a foundation where the first episode was all about the events happening. Now they're building a foundation to actually build onto, and I hope that foundation they're building is sturdy, because this is probably going to fall apart quite quickly. I do hope it carries on. It's slow going now. You just got a few basic bits and pieces. Picard's gathering his crew. Data's daughter is obliviously unaware of what's actually going on, even though I think she knows what's going on. She's not an idiot, that one. And I can't wait to see more fight scenes with her. Acting. Now, I really thought the acting between the Romulan spy, the super secret ninja spy with nunchucks, and Data's daughter, those two actors were very well together. You could see there's a bit of chemistry there, even though they're in bed and whatever have you. But there's a lot of chemistry between them, as in they were acting off each other, not one being a plank board and one constantly bouncing off it. It was good to see. Whereas you can see the ones with Picard sitting back having a shandy or a brandy or whatever he was having with the Doctor, you could see the synergy still there. The acting was very good. The Romulan housekeeper wife, or the wife of the housekeeper, or the female, whatever, she's a good actor. I like her. You can see that she's portraying the part very, very well, as is the male housekeeper. Their main interest and goal is to keep Picard safe, and that is essentially it. I think the Romulan dude's trying to be more of a guide, whereas the female Romulan housekeeper is more like trying to be a mom, as in keep you safe, guard you from everything else, but keep you safe. And they do sort of explain to Picard this super secret Romulan ninja's place with nunchucks. That apparently is even more secret than the most secret that they've all got. And somehow these housekeepers know. Well, not somehow. Their mother of the housekeeper told them while she got very drunk, and she blurted it out. Okay, that's believable. That's very believable. So, yeah, acting as a whole was great. Story as a whole was okay. I got on with it. I enjoyed it. I did. The animations and so on, like I said before, the the animation from the first sort of scenes, and you see the taxi land and take off again when they drop Picard off and he has to put his hands up with a bottle of wine. Or it felt very sort of 2000-y, from the early 2000s. That sort of animation style. Maybe that's what they could afford. It didn't fit. You'll see some lens flare in there now. It's secret hideouts for it's trademark secret. I don't know why they put lens flare, because you see the Admiral and the subordinate of the super secret spy agency with nunchucks talking. I'm going back and forth. I know. Give me a break. And there's just lens flare after lens flare after lens flare. I don't understand why. I mean, are they trying to portray that the future's so bright and clean and clinical and utopic? I don't know why that's the thing. When you actually get outside and you see Picard walking into the same building that they're all in, it looks like a rundown convention center from LA. I don't know why they picked that place, but never mind. But as a whole, I actually enjoyed it. It's laying some good groundwork in. I'm not too sure where this is going. The 2 episodes don't necessarily knit well enough into each other to be organic. I think that's my favorite word right now. Because there's some parts in the first episode that haven't been answered in the second episode, and I don't think will ever be answered because you just expect to forget them. And I'm not... I don't want my hand being held. I don't. But surely you could have had a cutscene where there was an officer. Thank you, Miss. Thank you, Admiral Picard, for telling us your story on the roof, and then walk out. 2 seconds. Never mind. Guys, thank you very much for listening to me ramble on about my thoughts on Picard's Star Trek Episode 2. My name is Bam Havoc, and I will see you all later. Cheers, guys. Thank you very much. Cheers. Bye.